Welcome back to another League 6 Demonic Packs video, and after today's reveal we now know all of the Echo items and their stats, so I figured it'd be fun to do a little bit of a tier list, go through each of the Echo items, break them down, and then just kind of throw them up and compare them against each other. Now I will leave a disclaimer here, this is not going to be a super sweaty breakdown. I'm not going to be ranking these items purely on which ones have the most maximum DPS depending on certain types of builds. Yes, how good they are will definitely be a factor on where they get put, but it's also going to be about other things like how easy they are going to be able to get. Do they have any new unique mechanics that are going to be really fun to use in this league with some of the packs? Because realistically, most people are picking their region based on the content they want to do. Yes, I know that isn't the case for everybody, and maybe you have one region that's up for grabs, and you wanted to see which Echo items came out to find out which one might best fill your plan. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our very first one, and that's the one we have access to in our starting region of Vhelm. Dropping from the Echo of Moxiato is going to be the Infernal Tacpotals. These are new boppers that have plus 72 in all three of the melee combat styles. They have a 10% Demon Bane buff, along with having a special attack that uses 50% and it'll hit 4 times on your target in quick succession, with 25% increased max hit and accuracy. It's a 4-tick weapon with 70 range strength and it weighs 3.6 kg. If we do pull up an item like the Dual Mochas, you can see these ones have an 81 strength bonus, along with 115 stab and 121 crush. So in reality, it really feels like the Infernals are going to be a pretty decently easy Echo boss, I would assume, because it seems like they are a pretty decent bridge to the early game. Maybe you're supposed to get these before heading to Moon so that it makes doing all of the Moon bosses much easier. So for that reason, I think these Infernals fit pretty well into the B tier. They're definitely not going to be an item that stays with you as you continuously progress later in the league, but if they are ultimately not that difficult to get, they're definitely going to be a very good option to use once you start. Now moving on, our next weapon on the list is the Fang of the Hound, which you can get in as Garnia from Echo Serb. Every hit this dagger makes has a 5% chance to cast the Flames of Cerberus at the target, and this is a fire elemental spell with a base hit of 10. This does also increase with elemental weaknesses and your magic strength. The stats itself for this dogger, as some people call it, aren't anything too crazy. It has plus 60 for stab and slash. Now a couple other interesting things to note that do have a bigger impact when it comes to the combat packs. It has an attack speed of 3 ticks and it does weigh less than 1 kg. So I think the real strength of this weapon is going to lie in how well you can use it with some of the combat packs you do get. I think the other really strong part of this weapon is its special attack. It'll use 50% of your special attack bar, but it will perform an instant hit with a guaranteed chance to cast that Flames of Cerberus. And if we do pull up the Pacts Planner and you combine this with things like melee weapons under 1 kg always trigger an additional melee hit. And then also things like special attacks have a 20% chance not to consume any charge. Melee weapons attacking under 1 kg attack 1 tick faster. And then things like once your melee range is doubled, you can also take whenever you attack an enemy from at least 2 tiles away with any style, you restore 2% of your special attack energy. All the way up to like a capstone where whenever you also deal damage with a melee weapon, you can restore 2% more of your special attack energy per hit. Now obviously I'm not going to sit here and say this is like the ideal combat tree for this weapon. This is really just some rag and tag thrown together combat packs. I think it's going to be a fun weapon to use. It does have some interesting potential with its special attack and some of those combat packs. It also does have some synergy with wearing the Devil's Amulet as your offhand if you are taking Quadrant and as Garnia together. But if we head back to the tier list, by itself, I do think it is either a low A or a high B, and for the time being, I'm probably going to leave it in a high B tier. But moving on to our next weapon on the list, we have the Dragore Blowpipe out of the desert. And this one's pretty funny because in all reality, it doesn't have any like crazy effects or do anything special. But at the same time, once you get some solid gear around it and get it all set up, it is going to be some outrageously consistent and very strong damage. The Blowpipe rolls twice for accuracy, taking the highest result, and each attack has a 25% chance to inflict burn on an opponent. Unfortunately, like previous leagues, you're not able to get it down to a 1-tick turret like we have in the past. But considering it does count as a thrown weapon, if we do pull up some of these packs, it's actually that one right there. While a thrown weapon is equipped, range strength is also increased by 80% of your melee strength. There is going to be using this pact, I imagine, some very interesting builds branching off into the melee packs, where depending on what melee gear you have access to, I guess even just the basic Moons gear we all have guaranteed in Vhelm, Those two alone will create some very consistent damage, not even mentioning the fact you also have all of the extra burn damage on top of that. With that said, I do think the Dragore Blowpipe is an A tier echo item. Even regardless of the melee potential synergy, you also have access to full Masori in Desert. Now our next item, we have the Fremy, and that is Vhelm. And when the helmet's worn, you have a 5% chance when you are hit directly with 1 or more damage that'll reduce it to 0. And when this effect triggers, your next special attack within the next 60 seconds will cost no special attack energy. I really do like this mechanic. I think it's very strong, but I think the biggest downside is the fact that there's only a 5% chance for it to proc. The helm will also count as an imbued Slayer helm, which is a nice benefit, but nothing too crazy if you were already anticipating picking the Slayer relic or going Mauritania. The helmet stat itself are plus 8 magic attack and 12 range, plus 40 in all of your defensive stats, except for only plus 10 in magic. You got a plus 8 melee strength, plus 2 range strength, and plus 3% magic strength. Now, I do think some of the biggest strengths when it comes to the Vhelm is probably its ability to go in some more of your tanky builds. It does have some nice offensive stats, especially for Tribrid style, but most of the time you're not really going to be doing a lot of Tribriding in any of your leagues. But I think the total power is really held back more from the fact that there's only a 5% chance to proc that damage mitigation aspect. For those reasons, I do think the Helm is a B tier item, definitely behind the Dogger, but above the initial weapons we get in the starter region. Overall, its power just doesn't seem all that strong unless I am overlooking some specific metas. But when we're talking about broken items on this list, the next one up are the ones I'm talking about, and that is the Shadow Flame Quadrant. Along with Quadrant and the new fork, you also get the Devil's Amulet, a 2-for-1 magic region, and what has historically been a terrible pick being Quadrant and anything else it ultimately provides. Definitely looks like that's going to be changing with this league. When using elemental spells on the standard spellbook with the staff equipped, you will fire an additional spell attack that deals 40% of the damage of the first attack. And when attacking with an elemental magic spell, they will always use the elemental weakness which your target is weakest to, regardless of the spell you're casting. The Quadrant acts as an infinite source of air, water, earth, and fire runes you can auto-cast from all spellbooks. It has a magic strength bonus of 15%, an attack speed of 5 ticks, and a range of 8 tiles. But the staff also comes with the Devil's Amulet that really brings its power up a notch. It has a nice 20% magic accuracy and an extra 6% magic strength damage. But the real benefit to this element is that all elemental spells will act as if any creature has an additional 30% elemental weakness to that element. Now, I do think it's very important to note because there has been some confusion about how exactly this weapon is going to work. If we jump over to the demonic packs, you can see that all of the elemental spells have their own set of packs. But the important thing to know is when you're using the Quadrant, you will still benefit from whichever one of those packs you have selected. So if you're doing something like Barrows, where initially the weakness for Barrows is air spells, unlike the Twin Flame where your staff essentially just switches to whatever style of spell you're using that needs to be for that boss's weakness, when you're using the Quadrant, let's just say you're using water spells. You'll still get both the benefit of the packs for your water spells, but since Barrows has a 50% weakness to air, you would instead just get that 50% weakness, but while using your water spells the entire time. And that doesn't even take into account if you also use the Devil's Amulet with it, that's another 30% extra weakness damage. But since both of these are from the same region in Quadrant, I'm just going to consider them basically like the same item and just put them together. I think their potential to synergize with the combat packs with a ton of a variety of different builds ultimately makes them our first S tier on this Echo item list. Now for our next item in Quadrant, we have the Nature's Recurve. A complete change and new item compared to the Salamander buff that we got last league that wasn't all that great. Once again, this bow doesn't look like anything too crazy. It's going to be a two-handed short bow that can shoot any arrows. Upon a successful hit, though, there is a 50% chance that your HP and prayer are restored by 10% of the damage dealt. We get a plus 95 range accuracy, 4 range strength. It's a 4-tick weapon, and it has a 7-tile attack range. Similar to the Infernals, I think this is going to be one of those that is just better served early on in the league. If you are going Quadrant, it is usually a very good first region pick. And that early on without having a ton of access to a bunch of different packs that you can use at your disposal. Echo Espori was one of the easier Echo bosses last league. You don't need a ton of stuff in order to finish it. I don't think the recurve will amount to any crazy in-game builds. but I do think it would be a very good early to mid-game option to take out some Slayer or even mid-game bosses. I think that means the Nature's Recurve will have to be a B tier Echo item. I think the healing and prayer mechanic will be very strong early, but Husky did confirm that they will not heal you above 99. So unfortunately, you won't be able to take advantage of any of the overheal HP packs. So I think that definitely hurts some of its potential later in the league. Now for our final 3 items, we head over to Mauritania for the Lithic Scepter. This is a one-handed magic powered scepter that can be charged with earth and body runes. Similar to something like the Soul Reaper axe, you are going to gain stacks. You will gain stacks every single hit, up to 14 total stacks. And your special attack will use 5 of them, instantly shatter your target, dealing 130% of your max hit as magic damage, and then up to 65% as typeless damage to 12 enemies within 3 nearby tiles. The strongest aspect of this scepter is definitely its special attack. That AoE effect is going to be incredibly good in a lot of different scenarios. I know one use case a lot of people are looking forward to using this staff is in the Nihilakis room. Since the AoE attack is typeless, similar to that of the Sunfire Spear from the last league, you'll be able to pretty easily clear the room, not to mention if you use a few demonic packs, you actually can get the staff down to just a 1-tick attack speed. Therefore, it would only take you 5 game ticks in order to build enough stacks to use that AoE effect. I think it'll definitely be a fun one to use, but it's not game-breaking in the slightest, so I think that'll drop it once again into the B tier. And that brings us to our final 2 Echo items in this league, and the first one is over in Tyrannon, and that's the Crystal Blessing. And this blessing offers you the Crystal Armor bonuses for accuracy and damage, and this applies to all melee and magic-powered weapons whilst equipped. Additionally, it provides a 2% magic damage and 20 magic accuracy bonus per crystal armor piece equipped. And its only stats by itself are a +5 additional prayer, but anything other than that, and it would be more broken than it already is. And on paper, this one doesn't really sound all that crazy, but enabling the crystal armor bonuses for all melee and magic weapons makes things incredibly strong. We've seen how good this blessing can be in the past in other leagues, but that didn't even take into account how incredibly strong you can make it with some of these demonic packs this time. Using this in tandem with something like the Shadow, it'd be some insane DPS in this league. But with that said, I do want to make sure it's noted that the Crystal Blessing's first effect, which is listed on this line up here, only works with a Power Staff equipped, and this will not be multiplied by the Shadow's effect. Now, compared to its counterparts, and with the potential to how it can synergize with a ton of different combat styles and combat packs, I do think this is an S tier Echo item, and I think it'll be included in quite a few different broken builds in this league. But talking about broken builds, I don't think this last one's going to be any different, and as a person who is picking the Wilderness, I am incredibly excited to be using this new weapon, and that is the King's Barrage. This is a 2-handed crossbow that'll shoot 2 bolts at once, one counting as a crossbow attack and the other as an ice attack, which will also freeze your current target in place. Unfortunately, this is not an AoE freeze, but it also can be toggled on and off via the weapon itself. The attack bonus will be 130. It does have some nice defensive bonuses, along with 14 range strength, an attack speed of 6 ticks, and an attack range of 9 tiles. I do think this was corrected, and it's actually 5 ticks on rapid. Now, I do think one thing that is very important to note when it comes to this crossbow, and you use it with something like the crossbow hits always max hits, the way the King's Barrage is going to work is the max hit is split between both of the attacks, even though you hit 2 times. Both individual hits do not do what your initial max hit actually is. And considering all the other bonus damage packs you would have along with that, you would be doing outrageous damage if that was the case. And as a person who's predominantly going to be using range and taking Corinne and Wildy, the King's Barrage is basically going to be like my late game equivalent of the Nature's Recurve. If we pull up something like the ZCB, you can see it has a +110 range accuracy. Yes, this is only a one-hand weapon. Now, if you are taking a region like Kandarin, you do have access to a very good 2-handed range weapon as well in the Heavy Ballista. But I think the damage from the King's Barrage alone, with the extra speed and added benefits, are going to make this my favorite weapon to use in this league prior to getting some of those in-game T-bows and sights. With that said, I think this is an S tier Echo item, which brings us to our completed tier list for all of the Echoes. But that'll do it for today. Let me know down in the comments below what items you think are in the way wrong tier, which ones you think should be better or worse, or even what Echo item you're looking forward most to using in League 6. If you guys did enjoy the video, consider dropping a like. Otherwise, I will catch you tomorrow with another relic reveal.